The Many Saints of Newark is a movie by many of the people who made the TV show The Sopranos, including David Chase, the showrunner of the original series. As a preface, I say all this coming as a fan of The Sopranos, so a lot of my criticism of the movie is going to have to do with its connections to the TV show. That being said, while my point is that a lot of things in Many Saints don't make sense because of the context of the show, I think they make even less sense without that context. In other words, the writing of the movie is its biggest flaw, which is concerning because the movie itself stands on a body of work with great writing. So what's new in this movie compared to the TV show? First of all, we have a character that was only mentioned by name and I guess by picture, Dickie Moltisanti. He is given a whole backstory in this movie as one of its leads, with Tony's parents and everyone in that generation as supporting characters. This leads to inconsistencies, since many of these characters are portrayed in flashbacks in the TV show with different actors. Putting that nitpick aside, according to The Sopranos, Dickie is supposed to be Tony's mentor into the mafia life, which the show left vague, basically a father figure. How does he hold up in The Many Saints of Newark? Well, it's complicated. Dickie murders his own father and talks to his uncle, who is his father's twin, a possible hallucination given David Chase's propensity for using those everywhere. We get this whole tragic story of fathers murdering sons and sons murdering fathers and romancing their mothers, which kind of connects the whole psychiatric Oedipus aspect of The Sopranos, but really serves to make the plot of the movie quite convoluted for no real reason. While the parallels are drawn between Tony of The Sopranos and Dickie of The Many Saints of Newark, the relationship that is actually supposed to connect them, the relationship that is marketed as the core of the movie, simply isn't. Let me expand on what I mean. Dickie has good chemistry with Tony as far as acting is concerned, but the writing leaves much to be desired. Like I said before, their scenes are good, but you're left wanting more of them and more of an actual mentorship or real relationship. Other than giving Tony some advice and stolen goods while his father's in jail, there's not much else connecting Dickie and Tony. Tony starts the movie as a troubled kid and is still one at the end. He doesn't really have much room to develop as a character, and the perfect vehicle for that development, being the other male lead Dickie, kind of just distances himself from Tony the entire movie because he doesn't want him to join the mafia. At the end of the movie, Dickie finally tells Silvio he might finally become that mentor to Tony by guiding him into the mafia as a member of his crew or whatever, but he really does nothing concrete before being murdered in the exact next scene. So we don't get to see Tony really change at all or become a new person, right? We don't get to see him become the Tony that he's supposed to be in The Sopranos, according to the movie poster or whatever. All in all, the Dickie-Tony relationship and the Tony-Christopher relationship it's supposed to parallel don't even resemble each other in terms of depth and connection. You get the feeling that Dickie as a character is somewhat wasted, which is really a shame considering Alessandro Nivola does a great job portraying him. According to David Chase, the movie was made to be watchable for people who've never heard of the series. So why does the movie open with the voiceover of a very dead Christopher Moltisanti in his grave, a major character who dies during the TV show's runtime? There are no threads connecting Christopher with any of the plot points in the movie either, other than being Dickie's son who gets born, I guess. So this character is literally born and ends as a baby during the movie's timeline, and yet he delivers the opening and ending monologues that introduce and end the story of the movie, quite literally as a corpse or disembodied ghost. Other than confusingly spoiling Chris's fate to the audience who hasn't seen The Sopranos, it serves no purpose whatsoever. As fan service, it's even sadder as a Sopranos fan when you remember how well Tony and Chris were written in that show. This ham-fisted inclusion of Christopher parallels its treatment of the rest of the characters from the source material. Like I said at the beginning, I'm trying to see the movie from two viewpoints here, as a Sopranos fan, as someone who's never seen it. And both ways it just seems confusing and muddled. Nothing is really done with Carmela or Charmaine for that matter, or Jackie or Ralphie or any of the people Tony was supposed to have grown up with. The only Sopranos characters in his generation who really have screen time are those who end up being Tony's crew, and yet they're used for a couple tropes, I guess, and inside jokes. And don't get me started on Silvio. While in the show he's supposed to have come up with Tony and been made as the result of the same heist they planned together, in the movie he's a balding mafioso who's already Dickie's right-hand man while referring to Tony as a kid, while Tony is still literally a kid. I mean, he calls him a kid. It's just as if David Chase forgot any sense of consistency for most of the universe's supporting cast and just uses them in the movie as throwbacks to the show that sometimes advance the plot slightly. In other words, timeline's all fucked up. To hammer my point home, I'll give you another example. Tony's dad is this mafia criminal who gets arrested and is also an absentee father because, he's in jail. With this in mind, Tony's mom has a rough time being a good mother, given her own tendency to also be a psychopathic asshole. So, at least that part kind of makes sense. Tony's uncle is petty and has an inferiority complex about being the butt of a joke. This is nothing new. This is all character traits that have been described in The Sopranos. There is something maybe added to Tony's mom's character to make her seem a little bit more sympathetic, but that can really be boiled down to she makes a burger for Tony when, I don't know, she doesn't usually make burgers or something. Either way, this is nothing new. They act out some scenes that are only referred to in the show and answer some questions that in hindsight really didn't need to be answered. It feels like due to the time frame of the show, there was an obligation to include them, but really they don't need to be included since these characters don't really contribute anything to the plot. Meanwhile, if the quilt of tangled story threads and unnecessary characters wasn't enough, there's yet another lead with their own convoluted side plot who ends up becoming Dickie's antagonist. This is a brand new character called Harold McBrayer, who was inspired by the Black Power movement to go from lowly associate of, I guess, Dickie's crew to making his own crime family. While having two opposing leads sometimes works in movies like The Prestige, in The Many Saints of Newark, there isn't even enough room for just the characters from The Sopranos, much less this retelling of Mafia 3. The attempt to tie in the Newark riots and the whole Black Power movement just doesn't make sense, both from a historical and storytelling perspective. Maybe Harold's arc is an attempt to comment on police brutality, crime, and minority communities, which is certainly very topical in this day and age, but given the already bloated runtime of a movie, it doesn't really make much of a statement and just ends up weighing the entire movie down. Maybe they could have explored this better in an actual miniseries, but I really don't think they had enough to go with considering that they had a movie to put out. Just looking at the movie as a somewhat fantastical period piece with some action and very strong acting, it's still enjoyable in many ways. You can tell that a lot of the same people that worked on The Sopranos also worked on this movie, and that itself lends some nostalgia in a way. The setting, characters, lighting, and especially acting are all to be commended. A lot of people were worried about Michael Gandolfini doing a bad job of portraying Tony Soprano, which his father portrayed in the TV show. The biological resemblance to his father is so uncanny that it makes up for any acting deficiencies he might have had trying to portray the character that his father did. In short, I think he did a good job. As a Sopranos fan, however, it's kind of disappointing to see the assets and talent wasted in a middling, contradicting plot. I'm pretty sure me drawing parallels has become overbearing by now, but I think Many Saints of Newark and El Camino of Breaking Bad suffer from the same problem when it comes to being a film spinoff of a TV show. While El Camino's problems aren't really plot contradictions, besides, I guess, Todd being fat, in broad strokes, its plot also really struggles to be meaningful in the shadow of its parent work. There's a paradox here. Writers of TV shows have to make their film spin-offs appeal to fans of the show while also making the film its own thing for other audiences. Also, it's really hard to do all that with a limited runtime of movies. TV shows span many episodes across seasons, while films have to tell their story from start to finish in a couple hours. So, you can really see where the writers of the show struggled, and the result is to be expected. A lot of criticism of the timeline being ruined and of the blatant fan service. Overall, is this movie worth watching? If you love The Sopranos and don't mind cringing quite a bit at all the inconsistencies, it's worth a shot. I really enjoyed Alessandro Nivola's and Michael Gandolfini's performances, and it might be enough to make you forget about what the writers did to Silvio. But if you haven't watched The Sopranos, it's definitely a no, unless you want to spend most of your time confused while watching spoilers for one of the greatest TV shows of all time. That's my review of The Many Saints of Newark. This was Kabi. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next video.